their eyes out, but when they were brought in the next day, they said that the missionaries treated them very kindly and gave them a nice home, good food and clothing. They said they were blind long before they became Catholics, and also said that the Prefect had taught them to say that the missionaries were cruel to them, which was not true. The blind children begged to go back to the school and said that they were very happy there. Her Majesty said, "That may be all right for them to help the poor and relieve their suffering. For instance, like our great Buddha Ju Lai, who fed the hungry birds with his own flesh. I would love them if they would leave my people alone. Let us believe our own religion. Do you know how the Boxer rising began? Why, the Chinese Christians were to blame. The Boxers were treated badly by them, and wanted revenge. Of course, that is always the trouble with the low class of people. They went too far, and at the same time thought to make themselves rich by setting fire to every house in Peking. It made no difference whose house. They wanted to burn so long as they could get money. These Chinese Christians are the worst people in China. They rob the poor country people of their land and property, and the missionaries, of course, always protect them, in order to get a share themselves. Whenever a Chinese Christian is taken to the magistrate's yamen, he is not supposed to kneel down on the ground and obey the Chinese law, as others do, and is always very rude to his own government officials. Then these missionaries do the best they can to protect them, whether he is wrong or not, and believe everything he says, and make the magistrate set the prisoner free. Do you remember that your father established rules in the 24th year of Guangxu, how the Chinese officials should treat the bishops whenever they had dealings with each other? I know the common class of people become Christians, also those who are in trouble, but I don't believe that any of the high officials are Christians." Her Majesty looked around and whispered. Kang You-wei, the reformer of 1898, tried to make the Emperor believe that religion. No one shall believe as long as I live. I must say that I admire the foreigners in some way. For instance, their navies and armies and engineers, but as regards civilization, I should say that China is the first country by all means. I know that many people believe that the government had connections with the Boxers, but that is not true. As soon as we found out the trouble, we issued several edicts and ordered the soldiers to drive them out. But they had gone too far already. I made up my mind not to go out of the palace at all. I am an old woman, and did not care whether I died or not. But Prince Tuang and Duke Lan suggested that we should go at once. They also suggested that we should go in disguise, which made me very angry, and I refused. After the return of the court to Peking, I was told that many people believed that I did go in disguise, and said that I was dressed in one of my servant's clothes, and rode in a broken cart drawn by a mule, and that this old woman servant of mine was dressed as the Empress Dowager, and rode in my sedan chair. I wonder who made that story up. Of course everyone believed it, and such a story would get to the foreigners in Peking without any trouble. Now to come back to the question of the Boxer rising. How badly I was treated by my own servants. No one seemed anxious to go with me, and a great many ran away before the court had any idea of leaving the capital at all, and those who stayed would not work, but stood around and waited to see what was going to happen. I made up my mind to ask and see how many would be willing to go, so I said to everyone, "If you servants are willing to go with me, you can do so, and those who are not willing can leave me." I was very much surprised to find that there were very few standing around listening. Only 17 eunuchs, 2 old women servants and 1 servant girl, that was Shou-Chu. Those people said they would go with me, no matter what happened. I had 3,000 eunuchs, but they were nearly all gone before I had the chance of counting them. Some of the wicked ones were even rude to me, and threw my valuable vases on the stone floor, and smashed them. They knew that I could not punish them at that important moment, for we were leaving. I cried very much, and prayed for our great ancestors' souls to protect us. Everyone knelt with me and prayed. The young Empress was the only one of my family who went with me. A certain relative of mine, whom I was very fond of, and gave her everything she asked, refused to go with me. I knew that the reason she would not go was because she thought the foreign soldiers would catch up the runaway court, and kill everyone. After we had been gone about 7 days, I sent one eunuch back, to find out who was still in Peking. She asked this eunuch whether there were any foreign soldiers chasing us, and whether I was killed. Soon after the Japanese soldiers took her palace and drove her out, she thought she was going to die anyway, and as I was not yet assassinated, she might catch up with the court and go with us. I could not understand how she traveled so fast. One evening we were staying at a little country house, when she came in with her husband, a nice man. She was telling me how much she had missed me, and how very anxious she had been all that time to know whether I was safe or not, and cried. I refused to listen to what she was saying, and told her plainly that I did not believe a word. From that time she was finished for me. I had a very hard time, travelling in a sedan chair from early morning, before the sun rose, until dark, and in the evening had to stop at some country place. I am sure you would pity me, old as I am, that I should have had to suffer in that way. The Emperor went all the way in a cart, drawn by a mule, also the Empress. I went along and was praying to our great ancestors for protection, but the Emperor was very quiet, and never opened his mouth. One day something happened. It rained so much, and some of the chair carriers ran away. Some of the mules died suddenly. It was very hot, and the rain was pouring down on our heads. 5 small eunuchs ran away also, because we were obliged to punish them the night before on account of their bad behavior to the magistrate, who did all he could to make me comfortable, but of course food was scarce. I heard these eunuchs quarreling with the magistrate, who bowed to the ground, begging them to keep quiet, and promised them everything. I was of course very angry. Travelling under such circumstances one ought to be satisfied that one was provided for. It took us more than a month before we reached Shi'an. I cannot tell you how fatigued I was, and was of course worrying very much, which made me quite ill for almost 3 months. So long as I live, I cannot forget it. We returned to Peking nearly in the 28th year of Kwangxu, and I had another dreadful feeling when I saw my own palace again. Oh, it was quite changed. A great many valuable ornaments broken, or stolen. All the valuable things at the Sea Palace had been taken away, and someone had broken the fingers on my white jade Buddha, to whom I used to worship every day. Several foreigners sat on my throne and had their photos taken. When I was at the Shi'an, I was just like being sent into exile, although the Viceroy's yamen was prepared for us. But the building was very old, damp, and unhealthy. The Emperor became ill. It would take a long time to tell you everything. I thought I had enough trouble, but this was the worst. When I have time, I will tell you more about it. I want you to know the absolute truth. Now let us come back to the question of Mrs. Conger's private audience. There must be something special, but I hope that she will not ask for anything, for I hate to refuse her. Can you guess what it is? I told Her Majesty that there could not be anything special. Besides, Mrs. Conger considered herself to be a person who knew Chinese etiquette very well, and I didn't believe she would ask for anything at all. Her Majesty said, "The only objection I have is that Mrs. Conger always brings one of the missionaries as her interpreter, when I have your mother, your sister, and yourself, which I think would be sufficient. I don't think it is right for her to do that. Besides, I cannot understand their Chinese very well. I like to see the ladies of the diplomatic body sometimes, but not the missionaries. I will stop that when the opportunity comes." The next morning Prince Ching told Her Majesty that the American admired